But she was having some trouble with her daughter's eating, and she said she'd been to the hospital and she'd seen the doctors, but she felt that she wasn't met with kindness and respect, and it was a real, like, it's a really stressful time if your child isn't eating much or isn't eating well, or you've got problems with food. It can be really stressful because as parents, we want the best for our children. We want them to eat well and we want them to be nourished. And when they're not, it becomes the stress. I think it's something you feel physically, like you feel really physically stressed about it. So she was really struggling. She said that we kind of sat down and had a chat over coffee in the class. And she said, "Oh, this is amazing. Thank you so much for listening to me. It's the first time somebody's actually really listened to me and given me some really kind of practical advice, but that's coming from a place of kindness." And that's where the idea for the food tree came about.
Hi everyone and welcome. Today I have Rachael Wilson joining me, sharing her knowledge and wisdom around developing healthy eating habits in children. She is one of the co-founders of an amazing organization called the Food Tree, which helps parents and caregivers understand how to implement an environment for successful eating. Rachael is originally from Ireland and she currently resides in New Zealand. Without further ado, let's welcome Rachael. Hi Rachael, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Really, really happy to talk to you today because I know that there are quite a few parents out there who may be struggling with meal times with their children. So I think this will be really helpful for a lot of our listeners today.
Brilliant.
So do you want to just start with sharing with our audience how the Food Tree came about?
Yeah. So I'm a dietitian. I've been a dietitian for around kind of 20 years nearly. And I've always worked a little bit differently. My mom's a therapist, so I grew up with kind of lots of, how do you feel about that? And me as a teenager going, I don't want to talk about my feelings, leave me alone. But when I got into doing dietetic work, I realized that food was more than just nutrition, that there was this whole other side of things, like what motivates people in their food choices and how people feel about their bodies and our relationship with food. And I'd had my children and I got into kind of doing a lot of mindfulness stuff and mindful self-compassion. And I kind of, my children were quite close together. I have a 15-month age gap between my kids. And I started doing all this other stuff to help myself. So I did mindful parenting and mindful self-compassion and stuff. And then I went, actually, some of this stuff would be really helpful for what I do in my other work. And so then did mindful eating and intuitive eating and kind of went down that track. But then I met Lauren, who's my business partner, and we met at a Rye parenting group. So we met at a toddler I did the infant and toddler course. So we kind of met at the toddler one, and she was having some struggles with her daughter's eating. And she's an incredible early childhood teacher. She's forest school trained in the UK, and yeah, she's just wonderful heart-centered care. And really knowledgeable. But she was having some trouble with her daughter's eating, and she said she'd been to the hospital and she'd seen the doctors, but she felt that she wasn't met with kindness and respect, and it was a real, like, it's a really stressful time if your child isn't eating much or isn't eating well, or you've got problems with food. It can be really stressful because as parents, we want the best for our children. We want them to eat well and we want them to be nourished, and when they're not, it becomes the stress. I think it's something you feel physically, like you feel really physically stressed about it. So she was really struggling. She said that we kind of sat down and had a chat over coffee in the class. And she said, "Oh, this is amazing. Thank you so much for listening to me. It's the first time somebody's actually really listened to me and given me some really kind of practical advice, but that's coming from a place of kindness." And that's where the idea for the Food Tree came about. It was looking at kind of advice for food and nutrition and bodies, but that it's coming from a place of kindness and compassion. So we do a lot of different stuff. I've kind of done a lot more stuff in body image and eating disorder work recently, but we also focus on children and fussy eating and starting solids and allergy management and things like that.
Okay, and so if So if a parent or a caregiver is listening and they have a child who is really fussy at the moment, or comes to the table, has one bite and leaves, and that's it for the entire day, what can we do to help this child, or help us to center ourselves and to be okay with that, and finding ways to move through that?
There's quite a few things. If we start, one of the things that I trained with an incredible dietitian and family therapist in the US called Ellen Satter, and she's kind of she's in her 70s or 80s now, and she's one of the pioneers of the relationship with food, and how to create a structure that helps children to develop autonomy around their bodies when it comes to food. So one of the things that she talks about is something called the division of responsibility. So as parents, we're responsible for the what, the when, and the where of food. So we decide what goes on the dinner table. So we decide what we're going to feed our children, where meal times are going to be. So whether that's a picnic table out in the park or sat at the table, so we decide where meal times are, and we decide the structure and routine of when food is served. And after that, we leave it up to children to decide whether and if they want to eat. So they have control of their own bodies in terms of deciding if they want to eat from what you've put on the table. I usually give parents some guidance around the what, so what to feed and how to feed. Children really like structure. So they kind of, I don't know if you've heard Nathan Wallace talking about kind of how structure and boundaries are kind of create that space of safety for children. So having a structure that children know what's coming next. So if they know we have breakfast, snack, lunch, snack, evening meal, snack, kind of, they like that kind of structure around food, that they know what's coming and when meal times are. So we talk about having a structure around meal times that children know when food's coming, but also allowing some freedom of choice within that. So one of the things, particularly with fussy eaters, is serving foods family style. So that is where you kind of do a smorgasbord meal where you put the food out in the middle of the table and let children self-select from what's on the table.
What if the child only wants to eat, say, the sweet, sugary foods that are on the table?
What we need to do is there's two things, and I'll kind of, one thing is that we need to let children's intakes will vary from day to day, from week to week. Like there was research studies looking at children, toddlers, kind of older toddlers from 3 to 5, and their meals, the intake that they were having was varying from 400 calories a day to 4,000 calories a day.
Oh, wow.
From day to day. So there's a huge variation in what children will eat.
The same child?
The same child, yeah.
Wow.
So there's going to be days where they're absolutely starving and you can't fill them up. And there's going to be days where they will eat next to nothing. And that's normal. And an element of kind of fear about trying new foods is normal as well. So coming back to your question, I'm kind of, we need to let children choose what they feel like eating. Sometimes it's going to be all the carbs. Sometimes it's going to be lots of fruit. Sometimes it's going to be just dairy foods. But they will, over the whole week, manage to meet their requirements. I've worked with children who I do a lot of work with a group of children that have a diagnosis called ARFID, which is a really, really selective eating disorder. And some of them will only be eating 5 foods. But I'm always surprised when I do a nutritional analysis on them. Most of them manage to meet the requirements, which is amazing. So generally, children will get what they need. But with sweet foods, it's one of the areas where the kind of sweet foods have a little bit of an upper hand. So it's a bit of an exception to the division of responsibility. So children need to learn how to eat sweet foods because they're around, they're in our lives. But there's some ways that we can structure how we allow children to learn how to eat those foods and to learn how to self-regulate those foods, because they can learn to self-regulate them if we give them the opportunity to do that. So I would look at having something sweet, a child-sized portion of something sweet at meal times a couple of times a week. So like a child-sized portion is about the size of the palm of their hand. So that sort of size portion of, be it a muffin or some ice cream or some cookies or something, whatever it is, everybody has different food beliefs when it comes to sugar, like or food in general. Like some people like more plant-based meals. Some people are concerned about the environment and they eat for sustainability. Some people have religious beliefs that affect how they feed. And people have different foods that they like and preferences and things as a family. So children will learn to eat how we eat, and given repeated exposure to a wide range of foods. So with mealtimes, you're giving them, with sugary foods, you're giving them the exposure a couple of times a week at a mealtime where the food is served at the same time as the other food, which people think that's crazy. I'm not putting chocolate on the table at the same time as the spaghetti bolognese.
But that's our conditioning, right? That's our conditioning. Like totally. A reward, a dessert. When you eat everything else, then you get the sweet stuff, which puts it on a pedestal.
Totally. Yeah, exactly.
So
and the other thing we're making all food be morally equal. So we're taking that pedestal out. So food's just food. It's not a treat. It's not a reward. It's just food. And yeah, it's some foods kind of might taste better than other foods. But children can still learn to self-regulate the sweet foods. The other thing is to give them access to as much as they want to eat outside of a mealtime. So maybe at a snack time where it's not going to interfere with their main nutrition from the bigger meals. Put the whole box of cookies on the table with some other foods, maybe with some hummus and carrots and some fruit or whatever, but have an assortment of different foods, but let them eat as much as they want of the other foods. And what you'll find is that they won't eat the whole packet of biscuits. They might do it the first time if they've been restricted, but they will learn how to regulate that.
Oh, that's so interesting.
and it's working, like I work on the other end of the spectrum as well, because I work with adults with binge eating disorder. And it's often when I hear the same story repeatedly every day coming from people, that they remember those moments in childhood where they were restricted from their eating. So they learned it's kind of, I use the analogy of do you remember with the first COVID lockdown, like that we ran out of toilet paper? Everybody just went and it's a bit like that with food. Like the more we restrict, the more we're afraid that it's not going to be there. So people just went crazy and just bought all the toilet paper, even though there was never really a restriction there, but it was this perceived notion that we were going to run out and we'd have no toilet paper. And it's the same with food. There's kind of this pendulum between kind of diet world or restriction and donut land. And the more time we spend in diet world, the more we're going to swing back over into donut land and kind of into that binging behavior. So what we want to teach our children from the beginning is that food's just food. It's there if you want it. You have control over choosing when you want to eat and how much you want to eat, rather than this perceived restriction that this food's going to be taken away, that you're not going to have access to it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. You've just made me look at myself and, when I was a child, I wasn't allowed sweets or chocolate. And if I was, it was this tiny, tiny piece. And then that was it. Like at Easter, my auntie would give me this big chocolate egg, and I was just allowed this tiny piece if I finished all of my food, and then it would be put on top of the fridge where I can't reach it. And now as an adult, I hide chocolate and sweets everywhere. Like it's in my bedside table, it's in my bag. So I make sure I have some if I go out. I make sure that, there's always some in the kitchen, but it's not in a place where it's with all the other food. It's in like some small cupboard.
Place.
What's that?
Some hidden secret place.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting.
It's really interesting. There was a study done in the US where they got children to put foods into categories. So they had foods you don't like, foods you can take or leave, and foods you really like. And they split them into two groups, and they sent half the group away with their families and had the parents use sweets as a reward to eat the foods in the middle category that they didn't really like or kind of were in the middle. What they found when they then came back and did another assessment, the children who had been bribed to eat food by using sweets as a reward put the foods from the not so sure about into the I don't like them. And the reason for that is because by using food as a reward, or using any sort of reward to get a child to eat a food, so by saying you can eat dessert once you finish this, you're reinforcing the idea psychologically that this is not a nice food, but I can eat chocolate once I eat this not nice food. Whereas when we just let food just be food, it's broccoli is food and chocolate's food, and that's just the way it is. And we take that kind of longing and kind of the kind of restriction away. So
I'm going to try that on myself. I'm I'm gonna, yeah, because I always give myself a bit of chocolate after a meal. But I'm gonna put it out at the same time as my vegetables and sustainable food and see what happens.
And often, like, sugar has just gotten such a bad rap lately. Like you hear these words like toxic and poison and addictive talked about sugar, but sugar itself is it's not proven to be addictive. The only research that shows that sugar is addictive is in people who have previously restricted it. So the more you restrict sugar, the more you become addicted to it.
That's really interesting. Do you think the same will happen if, say, for example, we said to children, if you finish all your food, you'll get some broccoli?
Possibly. Really what we want, like, it's the development of that, like, consent and body autonomy is allowing children, like, we don't know, like, I can't look at you and go, oh, you look really hungry at the moment. Like, you can't know somebody's hunger just by looking at them. So it's the same with children, like allowing them to trust their bodies to know when they feel full. And children are born with that kind of innate ability to self-regulate their intake. As long as we don't get in the way, it's when we start saying, have another bite, or kind of just finish this, and it can be hard for us because we've grown up with a kind of, I don't know, for many people, they grew up in the clean plate club where you weren't allowed to leave the table till you'd finished everything on your plate. And so it can be really hard for us. Yeah, definitely. I got that as well. And I think now people are more concerned about sustainability. So food waste has become a huge thing. But actually thinking about, well, what ways can we save our food waste and reuse things? And in Auckland, there's a really good website called Love Food, Hate Waste that has really cool ideas for how to save your leftovers and repurpose food and stuff. So you don't have to finish everything on your plate. You can use your leftovers in a different way. So one of the big things around,
Question about how you said, I can't look at you and tell if you're hungry or not. You said before to provide a place, a when, and
the where,
and a how, or where, when, and how.
What, when, and where.
Oh, what, when, and
where. So
the
what goes on the table, the when meal times are, and the where they are.
Yeah, and so you've got 3 meals plus the 2 snacks. And what if the child is wanting food between these 5 times during the day?
Generally, I'd recommend, I wouldn't recommend snacks in between meals. So looking at breakfast, snack, lunch, snack. And generally there's not going to be that much time in between those times. Like, they're going to be eating every couple of hours. So allowing that space, because what we want is when children are coming to the mealtime that they are a little bit hungry. Like, as parents, we know, oh, dinner's going to be in half an hour. Like, they don't necessarily need a snack now, that we're going to be eating soon. If every mealtime you're finding, like, I've noticed with my children, they come home from school really hungry. So we've actually moved our dinner a bit earlier, and we'll have a snack before bed. So I've moved dinner to around 4:30, 5 o'clock, so that they can eat kind of sooner from coming in from school, because they're really, really starving when they come in from school. So if you're finding that the meal times that you've got as a family aren't really working for your children, shifting times to work for them can be helpful. And one of the things that we also know that's really important with fussy eating is having family meals, trying to sit down and connect as a family as much as you can, because children learn from seeing us eating. If they kind of see us eating broccoli, they'll be like, oh, broccoli's not that scary. It's not that bad. Mum's eating it and she didn't die. So children need repeated exposure on a regular basis without any pressure to eat it. So the food is just there. And pressure can be really subtle. Pressure can be just have one more mouthful. Just taste it. Just try it. It tastes really good. Or the sales pitch, like, oh, but if you eat carrots, they'll help you see in the dark, or those kind of things.
Yeah.
So the more we pressure children to eat, the less they eat. And it's the same with the opposite. The more we try and restrict a child from eating more than what we think they need, the more they will eat, because they won't trust that they're going to get enough. So our job is to put the food on the table and making sure that there's at least one thing that they will eat. So if you've got a child that is quite selective with their eating, making sure there's at least one of their preferred foods on the table, even if it's just plain pasta or plain bread or peanut butter toast, making sure there's one thing that they can get their fill of, so that the mealtime is a pleasant place for them to feel that they can come. That they can come to the table, there's something they can eat. And the focus at the mealtime should not be about how much people are eating or what they're eating or making sure they're having something. The focus should be about connecting as a family. Because when we do that, the rest will come. When we focus on the food, it becomes this big thing, and pressure gets in the way, and we just get stuck in this cycle of trying to get our children to eat. And it's not our jobs to get them to eat. It's our jobs to provide the food in a comfortable environment without any pressure, and let them then trust their bodies and learn how to eat.
This has been really, really interesting. If parents or caregivers who are listening want to find out more information, how can they do that?
If you have a look on our website, we've got thefoodtree.co, which people are like, is there an NZ or a .com? No, it's just .co.co. We've got a couple of different online programs. So I've got an online workshop on starting solids with your baby. And it really it goes through the usual stuff about kind of choking and allergies and first foods and stuff. But it also really looks at that relationship with food from the very beginning. So that even at that stage, you're really tuning into your child's hunger and fullness cues and letting them learn to trust their bodies. So, and then we have another one on toddler feeding that really goes through all the kind of selective eating or fussy eating, or just if your child's eating well, just how you approach food in a way that helps them develop that body autonomy and positive relationship with food and their bodies. Some people, if they need extra help, they can do an online. I do Zoom calls and stuff like that. So I've got people that I see in Germany or America or different places all over. So I can work with different time zones and stuff. But generally, my online workshop it's better value for money, because you're getting the best of me. I spent so many hours recording and re-recording to make sure I say the thing that I want to say in the right way, and so it's a mixture of kind of videos and me talking and slides and stuff. So that's probably the first port of call for people. But if they need any extra information, we've also got our Facebook group, so people can ask questions in there as well. So, yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for coming on today and sharing what you know with our audience. I think there'll be a lot of parents out there who are having light bulb moments and feeling inspired to make some changes. So really, thank you so much for this.
You're welcome.